So you're welcome to find a place to sit. And I recommend a hard bottom chair. Can be a little bit easier, so that's an option for you, but certainly not required. So if you like, you might lengthen your spine towards the sky. So you might be lengthening your spine to the sky, and if you're lengthening your spine to the sky, you might notice your breath. I just noticed I was holding my breath, so if you notice that, one option might be to invite your breath back in. Maybe as you're noticing your breath, you might notice movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. And if you're noticing movement in your body as you breathe, you might invite the breath to slow and maybe deepen. Maybe breathing into your stomach, into your belly. And as you're breathing, you're welcome to notice the pacing of your breath. Like, are your inhales and exhales similar in length, or are they different? You're welcome to just notice. Maybe turning your head to one side. So you could be turning your head to one side, maybe turning it part of the way, or you could turn it as far as you can. You're in charge of how far to turn your head. Maybe noticing your breath. And if your head is turned to the side, you might bring it back to center and maybe switching sides. So you might turn your head the other way. So you might be turning your head to one side, maybe turning it as far as you can, or perhaps turning it part of the way. You have a choice. You're welcome to notice the breath. And if your head is turned to the side, you could bring it back to center and maybe tilting your head to one side. So you're welcome to tilt your head to one side. So maybe your ear is moving in the direction of your shoulder. So you might be tilting your head to one side. Maybe noticing some sensation in the side of your neck. You might notice it somewhere else. You may not notice any sensation at all. If your head is tilted to the side, you might bring your head back to center and maybe switching sides. So you could tilt your head the other way. So you might be tilting your head to one side, maybe noticing your breath. So you might be noticing your breath, maybe noticing movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. And if your head is tilted to the side, you might bring it back to center. And maybe rolling your shoulders. So you could roll your shoulders forward, or you could roll your shoulders back. So you might be moving your shoulders in some way. If you're moving your shoulders, you might bring them back to center, maybe resting them, and perhaps reaching one arm up to the sky. So you might reach one arm up to the sky and maybe staying here. Another option might be to lean to the other side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe placing your bottom arm on your leg or on the chair or floor. You have a choice. Maybe noticing your breath. If you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up to center. And if your arm is lifted, you might lower it. And perhaps switching sides. So you could reach one arm up to the sky. So you might have one arm lifted, maybe staying here. Another option might be to lean to the side. So you might be leaning to one side, maybe noticing sensation in your shoulder or in the sides of your body. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if you're leaning to the side, you might lift back up, then perhaps releasing your arm if it was lifted. And maybe you might place your hands on your legs, and maybe as you inhale, you might move your belly forward, maybe lifting your chest and your head. Maybe as you exhale, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin towards your chest. And you're welcome to do that again. Maybe as you inhale, you might move your belly forward, maybe lifting your chest and your chin towards the sky. And maybe as you exhale, you might round your spine, perhaps lowering your chin towards your chest. You're welcome to move between these two shapes if you like, or hold one. You have a choice. Perhaps noticing your breath. And maybe the next time you inhale, you might make your way back up to seated. And maybe extending one leg out in front of you. So you might place your heel on the floor of your extended leg. You might straighten that leg. You could have a bend in your knee. You have a choice. And maybe staying here, you could keep your spine lifted. Another option might be to fold forward part of the way. So maybe resting your arms on your legs. Another option could be to fold so that you place your hands on the floor. You have a choice. You might notice some sensation in your leg, your extended leg. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if you're folded forward, you might lift back up. And if you've extended your leg, you might bring it back in. And you're welcome to switch sides. So you could extend your other leg out in front of you, perhaps placing your heel on the floor, maybe lengthening your spine to the sky. One option might be to fold forward, perhaps placing your hands on your legs or on the floor. You have a choice. Maybe noticing your breath. I just noticed I was holding my breath, so if you notice that, you might invite it back in. And if you're folded forward, you might lift back up. If your leg is extended, you might bring it back in. Perhaps bending your knees, you might place your feet hip distance apart. And if you'd like, you might lean back. So you might lean your torso back, perhaps leaning back so that you have space between your body and the chair. So you might have to scooch forward in your chair to do that. And you might notice some sensation in your abdominals. You could notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if you're leaning back, you might lift back up to center, perhaps placing both feet on the floor. You might pause to notice your breath. And if you'd like, maybe turning to your right. So you might turn to your right side, perhaps placing your left hand on your right leg. You could place your right hand on the chair behind you. You have a choice. And maybe turning to face forward again if you were turning to the side, and perhaps switching sides. So you might turn towards the left, maybe placing your right hand on your left leg, perhaps placing your left hand behind you. Maybe noticing some sensation in your back or the front of your torso, or you might notice it somewhere else. Maybe not at all. And if you're turning to the side, you might turn back to center and perhaps crossing one leg over the other. So you might cross your ankle over your other thigh. So you might have one ankle crossed over your thigh, maybe opening your knee to the side. So your legs might look like a figure four shape. And you might stay here, perhaps lengthening your spine to the sky. Another option could be to hinge at your hips, maybe folding forward over your front leg. So you have a choice. You might fold forward, you might stay lifted. Perhaps noticing your breath. You might notice movement in your belly or chest as you breathe. And if your leg is crossed over, you might release it, perhaps switching sides. So you might cross your other leg over, maybe crossing your ankle over your thigh, perhaps opening your knee more to the side. You might lengthen your spine, or you could fold forward over your front leg, top leg. You have a choice. Maybe noticing some sensation in the outer hip of your top leg. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. And if your leg is crossed over, you might release it. And perhaps extending one leg out in front of you, you might lift your heel up off the floor. So you might extend one leg out in front of you. You could have your foot up off the floor like a couple inches, or you could raise it a couple feet, or anywhere in between. You have a choice. Maybe noticing the breath. And perhaps lowering your leg to the floor. You're welcome to switch sides. So you might extend your other leg out in front of you, perhaps lifting your foot up off the floor. Maybe noticing sensation in your lifted leg. You might notice it somewhere else. Maybe not at all. And perhaps releasing. You're welcome to bend your knees, maybe placing both of your feet about hip distance apart on the floor. And maybe rocking from side to side. You might move slowly, side to side on your hips, on your bottom. So you might be swaying side to side, perhaps noticing sensation in your bottom. You might notice it somewhere else, or maybe not at all. You're welcome to return to center and find a place to rest. So you might find a place to rest, maybe staying seated. You could lean back in your chair or on the floor. And we'll just rest for about 30 seconds. I'll quiet my voice as we rest for about 15 more seconds, maybe noticing your breath. You're welcome to stay resting where you are longer. If you were leaning back, you might make your way back to seated. It's been my pleasure to guide your practice today. Peace. Thank you so much for